Have you ever stopped to think what a nation's DNA, its actual genetic code, could tell us about its history, its deep history?
It's a fascinating question.
Because if you have, then Liberia offers one of the most compelling examples you could possibly find.
Absolutely. A small country in West Africa, often kind of overlooked, wouldn't you say?
Totally. But it holds this truly remarkable, genetically rich story, maybe one of the most unique on the continent.
It really is.
So let's dive into this. Liberia's origin story is just fundamentally different. It's the only African nation founded by freed African-American slaves.
And that specific origin point, that's key. It created this genuine genetic crossroads.
Yeah, a blending, right. You have these ancient indigenous West African lines.
Meeting a returning diasporic gene pool. People coming back from the Americas. It challenges so many assumptions about genetics and identity.
Is there anything else quite like it on this scale? I mean, this profound, multi-layered genetic story?
It's certainly rare.
Okay, so our mission today for this deep dive is to unpack maybe 3 big reasons why Liberia's genetic makeup is so incredibly special, why it grabs the attention of scientists, anthropologists, political historians.
It touches on so many fields.
It really does, and this is where the story gets, well, unexpected. Reveals some deeper layers.
That idea you mentioned, the profound genetic reconnection, it's more than just history, isn't it? It's biology playing out.
Exactly. It's this deep genetic weaving, new threads coming into an ancient fabric.
A very ancient fabric.
Right. So let's start there. This diasporic return and the genetic reconnection. We're talking about the Americo-Liberian settlers.
Freed slaves, returning starting in the 1800s.
And they studies show they carried an incredibly mixed genetic background. It wasn't purely West African.
Not at all. They carried significant European and even Native American DNA markers. It's like they were these walking, talking genetic time capsules from their experience in the Americas.
That's a crucial point. What kind of percentages are we talking about?
Well, researchers estimate that roughly maybe 25 to 30% of that initial Americo-Liberian gene pool reflects non-African ancestry.
25 to 30%? Wow.
Yeah. And this primarily came from, the historical context that white slave owners and also connections with Native American women, particularly in the U.S. Southeast.
And specific studies back this up?
Oh, yes. Work by researchers like Breck and Tishkoff, among others, really highlighted these findings around 2009-2010.
So when these settlers arrived back in Africa, they weren't just, returning home in a simple sense. They brought this whole other genetic story with them.
Precisely. And then they intermarried with the local indigenous groups who were already there for millennia.
Peoples like the Kpelle, the Bassa, the Vai.
Exactly. And that leads to this really unique blend. You have 2 distinct genetic timelines meeting.
One ancient, native to West Africa.
And one diasporic, shaped by the transatlantic journey and then the return. How quickly do you think that mixing started?
That's a good question. I imagine it would have begun fairly soon after arrival as communities formed.
And this whole phenomenon, this genetic homecoming, it's just not something you see documented very often, certainly not on this scale.
Right.
So if you step back, Liberia, and maybe Sierra Leone to some extent, they become these real-world laboratories almost, living examples of how diasporic return can influence native gene pools.
It's like a reverse flow of the genetic impact of the slave trade.
Exactly.
Yeah.
A biological testament to resilience, return.
Yeah.
It gives us a rare chance to study that kind of genetic flow.
Okay, so that's one side of the coin, the returning diaspora. But what about the indigenous populations themselves? Because, I think there's a common misconception here that Liberia's native population might be, genetically quite similar across the board, uniform.
Yes, that assumption. And it couldn't be further from the truth. That gets us into our second point, indigenous diversity and maybe resistance to homogenization.
So what does indigenous diversity actually look like there?
Well, first off, Liberia is home to over 16 distinct ethno-linguistic groups. 16.
That's a lot for a relatively small country.
It is. And genetic studies consistently show significant variation, even between groups living pretty close geographically. You see really distinct Y-DNA haplogroups.
Passed down the male line.
Right. And distinct mtDNA variations passed down the female line. Tishkoff's work highlighted this back in 2009 as well. It's not a monolith.
And didn't some more recent research find something really startling about the genetic distance between some of these groups?
Yes. That was I think a 2019 analysis, it revealed something quite controversial, actually.
Which was?
That the genetic distance, the difference between the Kpelle people and the Kru people, both indigenous Liberian groups, is actually wider than the distance between some European populations.
Wider than between, say, Spaniards and Swedes or something like that. That's remarkable.
It is. It points to a really deep-rooted microdiversity within the region. We're talking potential origins, stretching back maybe 10,000 years, perhaps even more.
10,000 years of distinct development.
Yeah, exactly. And the bigger picture here, the implication, is that this kind of evidence just powerfully undermines those old, frankly, colonial assumptions.
The idea that Africa was somehow genetically undifferentiated, homogeneous.
Precisely. Liberia stands as proof that West Africa, in fact, holds one of the richest, most ancient reservoirs of human diversity. You have lineages that remain distinct, resilient, largely unmixed for millennia before the diaspora arrived.
Wow. Okay, so we have these incredibly ancient, diverse indigenous lineages, and then we have the returning diaspora with their own complex, mixed heritage.
Two powerful genetic streams.
So what happens when those timelines collide, not just genetically, but socially and politically? That brings us to our third area, doesn't it?
Indeed. And this is where things get complex, controversial even. We're talking about political genetics, essentially.
Controversies and political genetics, how genetic identity might intersect with power.
Exactly. It shifts from just biological fact to the realm of perception, social structures, and power dynamics. Some scientists, some historians, have really dug into whether perceived genetic identity played a role in Liberia's political divides.
Because for over a century, it was the Americo-Liberian elite who largely ruled the country, right?
That's correct. And historical accounts show they maintained very strict social hierarchies. Class distinctions were sharp.
And some scholars argue, controversially, that this elite might have believed in a kind of quasi-eugenic superiority. What does that actually mean in this context? Is it like a formal eugenics belief?
That's a really important clarification. No, not typically like the scientific eugenics movement seen elsewhere. When scholars use quasi-eugenic superiority here, they're suggesting a belief, maybe not explicitly stated as genetics, but tied to ancestry.
Okay.
A perception that their mixed background, combined with their Western education, their Christianity, their style of dress, made them somehow inherently superior, or at least more civilized and suited to rule than the indigenous populations.
So it's more about social ideology linked to perceived ancestry rather than a specific genetic theory they were citing.
Precisely. It's an internalized social ideology tied to who they were and where they came from, or rather where their recent ancestors came from. Now, it is absolutely crucial to state there are no direct genetic studies that could possibly support such an ideology. That's not how genetics works.
Right. Genetics doesn't determine superiority.
Absolutely not. But what the oral traditions and the political archives do suggest is that this sense of identity, deeply shaped by their unique ancestry story, likely played a significant role in the power dynamics, in who held power and how hierarchies were justified.
So it's about how perceived genetic identity was potentially used or weaponized within the social and political system.
That's a good way to put it. How identity linked to ancestry influenced social structures and power.
And ultimately, that clash of identities, fueled by these perceived differences and the associated power imbalances, contributed to the tensions.
That eventually, tragically, exploded into Liberia's devastating civil wars.
It's a sobering thought that the legacy of those class distinctions intertwined with these complex origin stories still echoes today in cultural memory.
It really is. It's a powerful and sometimes tragic reminder of how history, identity, and yes, even the perception of genetics can collide.
So if we try to pull all this together, Liberia's genetic story isn't just special in some kind of superficial way.
No, it's profound. It's profound because it tells this incredible living narrative. It's a story of forced migration, yes, but also of return.
Of cultures colliding.
But also finding ways to continue to blend. It's this intricate interplay between truly ancient roots and a very modern, complex identity.
It really forces you, the listener, to rethink what African DNA even means, doesn't it? It's not one thing.
Not at all. It's this vast, complex tapestry, woven with threads from millennia of history within Africa and threads from journeys across the ocean and back again.
A story of resilience, both ancient and modern.
Absolutely. And maybe the final thought to leave you with from this deep dive is this. History isn't just written in books or carved in stone.
It's also written profoundly in our blood, in our DNA.
With every generation adding another layer, another sentence to that ongoing narrative, something to consider further.